Hey guys, tonight we slip into the slightly beer-soaked shadows of a medieval tavern where the fire crackles, the benches wobble, and the stories are one part truth, two parts mead. You push open the heavy oak door and are immediately hit with the unmistakable aroma of roasted meat wet straw and the unmistakable tang of feet that haven't met soap since last Lent. A lute strums somewhere in the corner, off-key but enthusiastic, and someone's arguing with a chicken. Not about a chicken, with one. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle toward a rickety bench near the hearth, careful not to make eye contact with the man trying to play dice with himself. It's loud, lively, and smells like at least 4 different kinds of mould. And then you hear it, a sharp whispered tale spun by the local bard, who despite missing 2 front teeth and wearing a tunic with suspicious stains, commands the room like a gossiping grandmother. They say he begins that black cats have eyes like spies and ears like the devil's trumpet. The crowd leans in halfway between fear and delight. This isn't just a bedtime story for children, it's town law. You glance up at the rafters and sure enough, a black cat is perched there, staring, judging, probably taking notes. You sip your drink, something vaguely mead adjacent, and try not to think about it. But the tavern bard is just getting started. Long ago, in a village not unlike this one, muddy, moody, and slightly on fire, people believed black cats weren't animals at all. No, they were spies. Little furry agents of chaos who snuck into homes, listened to confessions, and ran off to report to witches, demons, or worse, tax collectors. The man with the chicken looks concerned. The story goes that black cats could slip through cracks in doors, vanish into smoke, and reappear precisely when gossip was at its juiciest. One tale even claimed a black cat followed a duke for 3 days, only to vanish when he confessed to loving his cousin's goose. The goose was never the same. Of course, not everyone believed these stories. Some people just thought black cats were regular cats, albeit the kind who knocked over your soup on purpose. But in many corners of medieval Europe, particularly during colder, hungrier years, any creature acting a little off could be accused of witchcraft. Or espionage, or both if they had a particularly smug face. Mainstream historians agree that by the 13th century, black cats had become unlucky symbols in various Christian communities. One famous 1233 papal bull, yes, that's a thing, and not a papal rodeo, linked heretics to devil worship, and by extension to black cats. The cats, it seems, got the short end of the theological stick. But here's the twist. Not everyone thought they were evil. In some ports and cities, especially those with a stronger connection to pre-Christian traditions, black cats were actually seen as protective. Fishermen in particular often kept them on ships to ward off storms, rats, and boredom. Historians still argue whether this was superstition, pragmatism, or a desperate need for something warm to talk to at sea. Back in the tavern, someone dares to ask the bard, "But what did the cats want?" The bard leans in, whispering theatrically. Information, secrets, the sound of your sins echoing through the night. A loud snore interrupts his monologue. The man who passed out face first into his soup earlier now emits a gentle bubbling sound with each exhale. Still the mood shifts. People eye their surroundings. The rafters, their own boots. Is that a shadow? Or a furry tail flicking behind a barrel? You might laugh, the bard adds, but they've seen things, heard things, and just because they haven't told you doesn't mean they haven't told someone else. You finish your drink, probably a mistake. The fire crackles, the shadows deepen, and somewhere just outside the tavern, a black cat slinks across the cobblestone tail, high as though it owns the place, which, to be fair, it might. And so the story purrs forward toward fear folklore and a very suspicious lack of cheese left on your plate. Because as it turns out, the entire village didn't just believe in cat spies, they were absolutely terrified of them. You wake up the next morning with a headache, a questionable crust of cheese in your pocket, and the distinct impression that you may have agreed to arm wrestle a goat. The tavern is quieter now, save for the occasional groan and the rhythmic scraping of someone trying to reheat stew with a hot spoon. Outside, the village is bustling, if by bustling you mean that two carts are stuck in the mud. A baker is yelling at his apprentice for burning the bread again, and a black cat is sitting directly in the centre of the road, staring at everyone like a feline judge at a moral tribunal. People cross themselves as they walk by. One woman mutters a prayer. A small child tosses the cat a crust, and it doesn't even blink, it just watches. This, you learn quickly, is not unusual. In this village, and dozens like it, scattered across medieval Europe, black cats aren't just animals. They're omens, agents, little four-legged informants who seem to know exactly when your pig went missing and whether or not you've been sneaking out to see the weaver's daughter. It's not entirely superstition, at least not from the perspective of the villagers. After all, cats move silently, appear suddenly, and make direct eye contact in a way that suggests they've read your diary and aren't impressed. And black cats with their midnight fur and mirror-like eyes are the worst of the bunch, or the best depending on your level of paranoia. You follow a group of peasants to the market square, where a cat sits, atop the well licking its paw, with an air of calculated indifference. One man leans over to whisper, "That one, she's always around when someone's about to confess something." What sort of things, you ask, because apparently you're a glutton for dramatic whispers. The man narrows his eyes. Adultery, stolen turnips. That time I said the abbot's singing sounds like a distressed goat. Fair. There's a popular tale retold more often than bread is burned about a baker's apprentice who tried to fake a miracle by hiding warm loaves in the church altar. He claimed divine bread multiplication. Impressive. Until a black cat was seen skulking behind the pews the night before, sniffing at the stash. When the loaves were found early by a cat-watching monk, the whole scam unravelled. The apprentice was chased out of town with a stale baguette. Coincidence, the peasants say. Not likely. One elderly woman, hunched like a question mark, with a face full of wrinkles, and wisdom insists. The cat's communicating code, tail flicks, ear twitches, subtle blinks. She swears she once saw a black cat tilt its head toward a locked chest just before her cousin Silver went missing. "That's not a cat," she mutters. "That's a conscience with claws." Mainstream historians note that in the 14th and 15th centuries, as fear of heresy and witchcraft spread, so too did the suspicion of animals associated with dark forces. Cats, already common as mousers, found themselves in the crosshairs of increasingly jumpy villagers and clergy. Black cats in particular were lumped in with demons familiars, and anything that couldn't be explained within 3 prayers and a sprinkle of holy water. And yet here's the contradiction: people still kept them around, because black cats, despite their reputation, were effective. They kept grain stores rodent-free, alerted owners to intruders, and in some cases were said to meow in warning before fires broke out, or someone got a bad omen twitch in their left eye. Historians still argue whether their continued presence was out of necessity or fear, or both. You witness one such moment that defies logic and invites gossip. A young man, nervous and shifty-eyed, enters the village shrine. He lights a candle, he kneels, he begins to confess something scandalous involving someone's cow and a misused ceremonial robe. And there on the windowsill sits the black cat, watching. He freezes, the candle flickers, the priest stares. The man leaves, quickly. "You see," says the woman with the wrinkles. They know. You try to ask someone how the cats got their reputation in the first place, and the answer varies depending on who you ask. One says it started when an entire harvest failed, the same year a woman adopted a black kitten. Another insists it began when a noble's cat refused to leave his dying bed, leading to whispered tales that it had come to collect his soul. Still another swears that it's simply because they blink too slowly and don't care about human feelings. All valid, but perhaps the most telling clue comes from a village chalkboard, one that lists local rules and superstitions. Below, do not curse during Vespers and no naked dancing unless blessed by the bishop. There's a new addition scrawled in smudgy charcoal. Do not tell secrets near the black cat. You glance to your left. Guess who's sitting on a cartwheel? Tail-curled eyes half-lidded, she knows. And as the sun begins to set, villagers move quicker. Doors shut, candles are lit, and the black cats disappear into the dark, their work apparently done for the day. But not for you. because someone just mentioned that even the church couldn't agree on what to do with these purring spies. The bells of the nearby chapel toll in that ever so slightly out of sync way that makes your eye twitch. You follow the sound to a modest stone church, its roof sagging slightly under the weight of years, and if rumour holds, at least 2 raccoons. You don't see any raccoons, but you do spot, perched on the lintel above the arched entrance, a familiar silhouette, pointed ears, watchful eyes, a black cat lounging like it owns the place, and to be fair, it might. Inside, the air is thick with incense and low whispers. The local priest, Father Oswald, is giving a half-hearted sermon on sin redemption and possibly sheep theft. It's hard to tell. His voice is soothing like a sleepy badger in a wool cloak. You take a seat near the back, noting the scratched wooden pews and the tapestry that appears to depict St. Bartholomew wrestling a fish, or possibly being attacked by a cod with opinions. Then you hear it. Not quite a meow, more like a soft chuff from the rafters. You glance up. There it is again. The same cat, same smug face. And then Father Oswald says, "And beware the creeping of wickedness, which may wear the face of a friend or the form of a beast." Coincidence, maybe, but as your neighbour shifts uncomfortably and makes the sign of the cross 3 times in under 5 seconds, you realise something important. The church never outright says, "Don't trust cats," but it doesn't exactly defend them either. Official church doctrine in the Middle Ages is often frustratingly vague when it comes to the animal kingdom. Dogs are loyal, sheep are spiritual metaphors, doves are holy, but cats are suspicious. Some monastic records even suggest that certain abbeys considered black cats to be symbols of spiritual ambiguity. Not evil per se, but not entirely welcome either. You find a dusty manuscript tucked in the scriptorium that references creatures who attend the silent sins of men and who vanish when their whispers are done. The accompanying illustration is either a cat or a particularly irritable squirrel. Fringe historians have unearthed stranger references, accounts of priests refusing to bless homes where a black cat lived, or of monks recording dreams where cats walked backward and spoke Latin. Historians still argue whether these were symbolic visions or the result of unregulated wine consumption. One rather vivid story from a remote monastery in Bohemia tells of a black cat who appeared every time the abbot lied. The cat would sit on the pulpit stairs, lick its paw, and stare directly at him. The abbot, understandably unnerved, began holding services in the courtyard. Eventually, the cat was invited to leave, via a polite yet firm application of holy water and a stern sermon about humility. But even that tale is ambiguous, because the cat always came back. Why doesn't the church just ban them? You ask a nearby friar who is currently polishing a candle holder with the focus of a man avoiding deeper questions. He sighs. Because my friend, if God made all creatures, then he also made the ones that judge us from the windowsill. You nod slowly. It's the most philosophical thing you've heard all day. Still, not all churchmen were on the same page. Some bishops, especially in regions where pre-Christian traditions still lingered, outright denounced black cats. Others kept them as pets. There are even surviving records of a bishop who bequeathed a silver bowl to his beloved Mauser Lucius. Lucius, it must be said, is an excellent name for a black cat. And yet, despite all the mystery and suspicion, black cats still wandered through monasteries, sometimes literally walking across sacred texts. You witness one such moment in the cloister. A scribe gasps as a cat steps daintily across his freshly inked manuscript, leaving perfect little paw prints on the margin. "Demon," the scribe whispers. "Proof of divine symmetry," replies his companion, squinting at the spacing. Modern researchers once analysed such manuscripts and found dozens of examples of feline interference, paw prints, smudges, even scratches. Historians still argue whether these were tolerated as part of daily monastic life or begrudgingly accepted as divine interruptions. Later, you're invited into a candlelit library, walls of vellum and dust, where an elderly monk explains his theory. Cats do not spy, he insists. They witness. There is a difference. You blink. They are the witnesses of what we hide in silence, what we mutter after confession. They watch us not to report, but to remember. That's comforting, maybe. As the monk shuffles away, a black cat leaps onto the desk beside you, curling its tail neatly and blinking once slowly, judgingly. You look at the monk's open book. The page describes familiar spirits beings believed to assist witches and sorcerers, and there, delicately inked in the margin, is a drawing of a cat with eyes like moons. You close the book. Outside, the evening bells ring. Villagers are already lighting their lanterns, and as you step out into the twilight, the cat follows you for a few steps before vanishing into the shadows, like it knows the next chapter of the story better than you do. Which, let's be honest, it probably does. Because this isn't the last time someone gets tried for talking to a black cat. In fact, the trials are just beginning. The market square is packed today, not with the usual haggling over stale turnips or the dramatic collapse of a cabbage cart, but with a crowd murmuring intense anticipation. A makeshift platform has been hastily assembled from barrels and planks that creak with theatrical dread. The town crier's voice booms across the cobbles. Let the trial commence. You squeeze into the crowd just as a man in a crooked hat holds up a cat, a black one. It dangles from his hands with the resigned dignity of a creature who has seen far worse, probably, in that same square, possibly yesterday. The crowd gasps, accused of eavesdropping, conspiring with known witches, and watching a bishop bathe. Well, the cat, for its part, blinks slowly. You've stumbled quite literally into what is either a bizarre prank, a communal psychosis, or a legally binding cat trial, which, yes, is a real thing. In medieval Europe, animals could be put on trial. Pigs, goats, insects, and of course cats. Usually for offences like trampling crops, biting children, or in this case, knowing too much. A friar nearby whispers, "It's the third one this month." The last one got acquitted though. Lack of evidence. The proceedings unfold with a mix of solemnity and farce. A prosecutor recites the charges, while the cat sits in a little basket labelled defendant. The defence, provided by a local drunk with theatrical flair, argues that the accused is clearly incapable of understanding Latin, let alone plotting against the church. A fair point. One particularly dramatic witness claims the cat appeared in her dreams 3 nights in a row, always seated on a windowsill, always watching. She knew about the pie the woman hisses. She knew. Historians confirm that animal trials weren't uncommon in parts of France, Switzerland, and beyond. Some animals were even appointed legal counsel. These proceedings were surprisingly formal, though let's be honest, the outcomes weren't usually in the animal's favour. Historians still argue whether these trials were symbolic scapegoating or just an excuse to have something to do on a Thursday. You glance over at the judge, a portly man whose beard could house its own village. He strokes his chin, narrows his eyes at the cat, and declares, "This animal is guilty of hiding the truth behind its whiskers." There's a murmur in the crowd. A sheep bleats in protest. The cat yawns. Punishment is debated. Exile, hanging, a stern warning, and one fewer sardine. Ultimately, the judge settles on an exorcism by bell. This involves ringing a handbell aggressively near the cat while muttering prayers. You watch as this unfolds. The cat, completely unfazed, licks its paw and then slaps the bell out of the priest's hand. The crowd gasps. Again. Witchcraft, someone breathes. The cat is escorted out of town in a wheelbarrow lined with hay and righteous indignation. You follow, because of course you do. The cat's new home, a nearby farm where it's expected to contemplate its sins and chase mice with a renewed moral compass. But the story doesn't end there. In the weeks that follow, more trials take place. A goose is accused of espionage. A ferret is suspected of harbouring heretical thoughts. A suspiciously well-behaved cow is said to moo in code. At the centre of it all, black cats continue to appear. On windowsills, in confessionals, even once in the mayor's soup. The village becomes obsessed. People start whispering about a network of cats, an organised purring intelligence. One man builds a tiny fence around his garden and claims it's cat-proof. His turnips remain untouched, but the fence is mysteriously covered in paw prints every morning. Then one evening a monk from the next village arrives in a panic. He's seen something, a ritual. Candles, robes, cats, a circle. What kind of circle, someone asks? A summoning circle, or possibly a grooming circle. It was hard to tell. Rumours swirl. Are the cats organising? Is there a secret feline language? Are they listening right now? You look down. A black cat is sitting beside your boot, gazing up at you with unblinking interest. You do what any reasonable person would do. You offer it a piece of bread and say, "I respect your privacy." The cat blinks once and walks away. Later at the tavern, people are still talking about the trials. But now the tone is different, more speculative, less fearful. Maybe the cats are just smarter than we think, one woman says. Maybe they're trying to help off as another. Or maybe they're just cats. But the idea is in your head now and you can't quite shake it. Because next you hear that some black cats don't get put on trial at all. Some get invited into castles. You're on the road now. Boots caked with mud, cloak damp from a very judgmental drizzle, heading toward a nearby castle, whose lord is said to have not one but 3 black cats. And unlike the townsfolk with their wheelbarrow exorcisms and theological bell ringing, this noble treats his cats like honoured guests. Or spies he owes money to. It's unclear. As the castle looms in the mist, tall, grey and aggressively pointy, you wonder what kind of man willingly surrounds himself with creatures the average villager would accuse of eavesdropping on dinner prayers. The guards at the gate are used to travellers gawking, and they nod you through without much fuss. Inside the courtyard bustles with servants, soldiers and of course cats. Sleek black ones lounging in windows draped over saddles, curled in baskets like sentient puddings. No one seems alarmed. In fact, you spot one sitting on the Lord's actual chair. "Shouldn't that be removed?" you whisper to a page. The page shrugs. If you want to lose a toe, Lord Evermond of Tanglewick, a man known for his impeccable moustache and his unwavering fondness for conspiracy theories, has decided that black cats are not threats, but tools. Information, he says, swirling his goblet dramatically, is the sharpest sword, and nothing gathers whispers better than whiskers. He insists his cats can recognize voices, discern lies, and even predict betrayals. You assume he's exaggerating until you watch him interrogate a visiting noble, based solely on the direction his cat's tail flicked during a handshake. North Lord Evermond mutters, "Definitely allied with the Northern Duchy, treachery confirmed." It's impressive, terrifying both. The cats, for their part, lounge about with the composure of creatures fully aware they've surpassed the guards in both rank and respect. You observe one receive a full roast quail from the kitchen, while the cook mutters for Lady Whiskerlot. She prefers hers slightly underdone. Historians document several nobles, especially in the 14th century, who kept black cats as companion symbols of mystery, or simply because they appreciated their rat-hunting abilities. Some believed cats absorbed bad luck, others thought they attracted it. Historians still argue whether these nobles were progressive deluded or just terribly lonely. Lord Evermond fits somewhere in between. He has a theory: cats are nature's surveillance. They're everywhere, always watching, and nobody questions it. "If I were a foreign king," he says, stroking his favourite cat with one hand and sharpening a dagger with the other, "I'd employ at least a dozen." To prove his point, he shows you a hand-drawn intel map pinned to his study wall. Coloured string connects portraits of people to tiny sketches of cats, complete with cryptic notes, like "sneezed twice." During cheese course, it was suspicious. Is this espionage madness or a groundbreaking feline intelligence network? You don't have time to decide because that night during dinner, the castle's alarm bell rings. An intruder has been spotted near the stables. Soldiers rush out, torches blazing. You follow only to find nothing. Just a trail of muddy footprints. And at the end of it, a black cat perched atop a barrel, calmly licking its paw. Everyone stares. Lord Evermond nods slowly, intercepted. Later by the hearth, you ask the steward if this kind of thing happens often. He sighs. Every week. Sometimes it's a spy, sometimes it's a drunk baker. But the cats always know. At least that's what the Lord believes. He adds, "Personally, I think they just like messing with us," which might be the most accurate theory yet. Still, the reputation spreads. Neighbouring lords begin adopting their own whiskered informants. Some train them unsuccessfully, others just build shrines. One noble in the east reportedly constructed a throne specifically for his cat. It's taller than his own. Even the court jesters get involved, telling jokes like, "Why did the black cat get promoted? Because it always landed on the truth." You smile, then frown, then realise it's actually kind of brilliant. Of course, not all royals are amused. Some see the cat craze as a sign of disorder of blurred lines between animal and advisor. One suspicious duchess allegedly tried to pass a law banning cats from courtrooms. Her chambers were mysteriously overrun with mice a week later. Coincidence? Lord Evermond, meanwhile, prepares his cats for their next great mission, diplomatic dinner surveillance. He attaches tiny bells to their collars, not to warn mice, but to intimidate guests. They know we're listening, he murmurs, but they don't know who told us. The cats saunter by, bells tinkling like wind chimes of doom. You decide it's time to leave before you're recruited for some shadowy operation involving sardines and coded meows. As you exit the castle, one of the cats follows you to the gate, pauses and taps your boot once with its paw. You don't know what it means. You just keep walking and wonder what happens when black cats get involved, not just in politics but in potions. You're not entirely sure how you ended up here. Possibly something to do with a wrong turn, a suspiciously well-timed gust of wind, and a mysterious meow. But now you're standing in front of a small crooked hut at the edge of a darkened wood. The chimney coughs out smoke that smells faintly of dried herbs and regret. Above the door, a bundle of twigs shaped like a cat's face. You knock. A woman answers wearing a cloak lined with feathers, a belt made of spoons, and an expression that suggests she has hexed people for less intrusive reasons than just visiting. Behind her, a black cat peers around her ankle eyes glowing like distant lanterns. Come in, she says, unless you're allergic. Inside the hut is a chaotic symphony of jars, bones, herbs, feathers, scrolls, and one very smug black cat perched atop a stack of spellbooks. The air is thick with scent lavender old leather, and something that makes your nose twitch and your third eye blink. You've met your first hedge witch. I'm not one of those witches, she explains while stirring a pot with a twig shaped like a fork. No coven, no midnight sabbats. I just make salves tell fortunes and occasionally yell at the moon. Fair enough. But it's her cat named Beetroot, oddly enough, that catches your attention. Beetroot never looks away, never blinks, and when you mention this, the witch laughs. He's listening, she says. He always listens. You try not to shiver. In many parts of medieval Europe, especially rural communities, witches were thought to have familiars, supernatural creatures, often black cats that served as companions, protectors, and occasionally delivery services for curses. While mainstream theologians argued about the existence of magic villagers were much more practical. They'd seen cats behave oddly, appear at strange times, and stare into the middle distance like they were watching your fate unravel. Beetroot hops down and pads across the room. He circles you once, then very deliberately sits on your foot. The witch raises an eyebrow. He likes you, or he's warning you. Historically, cats in folk magic were associated with both protection and mischief. Some healers believed a black cat's whisker burned under a full moon could ward off nightmares. Others swore that carrying a tuft of black fur would protect against curses or attract them depending on the direction of the wind and your luck with onions that week. She shows you her collection, a pouch of black cat hair labelled windward use only, a tiny vial labelled purification. A dried paw, thankfully fake, used to stir specific types of ointment. That one's more for theatre, she admits. People like the drama. You ask if the cat ever helps with the brewing. Of course, she says. He steps into the mix just when it's done. If he sneezes, it's potent. If he yawns, it's a dud. Fringe records from the 15th century include tales of cats being seen walking through poisoned gardens without ill effect. One apothecary claimed his cat could detect false ingredients by refusing to sit near them. Historians still argue whether these cats were chemically sensitive or just didn't like fennel. You help her prepare a tea for calming indigestion and existential dread. Beetroot watches the entire process like a tiny furry supervisor. He meows exactly once. The witch nods. Strong batch, she says. Later, as you sit near the hearth sipping something earthy and vaguely suspicious, she tells you of a neighbour who once tried to trap her cat thinking it held her secrets. He woke up the next day with 2 left shoes and an uncontrollable urge to rhyme. Coincidence, maybe, but you don't see many traps around her hut now. Somewhere outside, an owl hoots. Beetroot's ears twitch, and he slips through the door into the night without a sound. You ask where he goes. Where he's needed, she says with a shrug, or where the mice are fat. There are debates among scholars about whether the familiar idea was entirely folkloric or rooted in ancient shamanic traditions. Some suggest it was a way to personify intuition or luck. Others think people just needed a reason why the neighbour's cat always showed up when someone fell ill. Regardless, the belief persists. Cats, especially black ones, were said to guard thresholds, absorb negative energy, and on occasion whisper secrets in dreams. A few sources even mention that if you stare into a black cat's eyes at midnight, you'll see the truth of your heart or your neighbour's debts. Beetroot returns this time with a beetle in his mouth and the air of someone who's just uncovered minor heresy. He's a bit dramatic, the witch admits. You ask if she's ever tried to train him. She scoffs. You don't train a cat, you negotiate, usually with cheese. As the fire dims and your tea settles, you feel sleep pressing at the edges of your thoughts. The witch hands you a blanket. Beetroot hops onto your lap, and for a moment, just a moment, you think you hear a voice whisper something unintelligible from the rafters. Probably just the wind, probably. You drift surrounded by jars of roots, flickering candles, and the slow, steady purr of something older than the forest itself. But before sleep takes you fully, the witch leans close and whispers, "You should be careful near the town square tomorrow." Why, you murmur. There's a new woodcut being passed around. A woodcut, she smiles, of a cat, a black one, spying on a king. You arrive at the town square to find a crowd already forming. Not the panicked, pitchfork-wielding kind you're unfortunately familiar with by now, but a more relaxed gathering, the sort that usually appears when someone's about to juggle eels or unveil a new mural. Only this time, it's neither juggling nor art. It's propaganda. Specifically, a freshly carved woodcut posted on the notice board for all to gawk at. It depicts a very smug-looking black cat seated atop a royal throne, watching two arguing nobles while holding a scroll in its tiny paws. The caption underneath reads, "Trust not the beast that sees all and speaks naught." You blink. The cat has a monocle. People are whispering. Some laugh, others glance nervously at the roofs and doorways. One child tugs her mother's sleeve and points to a real black cat lounging near a vegetable cart. The mother pulls her away, like the cat just confessed to witchcraft and poor table manners. You approach the cart where the vendor shakes his head. "They say that cat was seen outside the Chancellor's window," he mutters, "the night before he lost his wig and half his fortune." You nod solemnly. That tracks. It turns out the woodcut isn't the only one of its kind. Across several villages, similar images have been appearing. Black cats lurking behind curtains, peeking over scrolls, even one lounging inside a crown, like it's the world's most judgmental hair accessory. Historians note that visual satire became increasingly popular in late medieval urban centres. Woodcuts were cheap, easy to replicate, and highly effective at spreading rumours, especially amongst populations that couldn't read but could interpret the glaring disdain of a carved feline. Some artists used cats to mock power, others to warn of unseen influences. Historians still argue whether cats were used symbolically to represent corruption, wisdom, or simply the uncanny ability to knock over cups during crucial negotiations. You pass a group of students, huddled around a new pamphlet, hand-inked, smudged, and full of dramatic flair. It describes the Order of the Whispering Paw, a secret society of black cats, embedded in noble courts, delivering intelligence through well-timed meows and cryptic grooming rituals. You assume it's satire, until you see someone reading it very, very seriously. One merchant starts offering charms to protect your thoughts from feline absorption. They're mostly just pebbles wrapped in string, but the demand is real. Meanwhile, tavern songs begin to change. You hear one particularly catchy ditty sung by a red-faced man with a lute that's only mostly in tune. The king made plans by firelight glow, but the cat had heard and told his foe, and now the kingdom's coffers low, beware the whiskered shadow. It slaps. The chorus involves hissing. You sip your ale and glance at the rafters. No cats for now. Back in the square, another woodcut is being nailed up. This one's different, less humorous. It shows a burning pyre, a crowd of jeering faces, and a single cat curled at the base watching the flames. No caption, just a paw print. You shiver. It's around this time You start to hear murmurs of something more troubling, people blaming their misfortunes on black cats again. Not just in jest or satire, but in serious tones. A merchant swears his missing gold vanished the same day a cat crossed his path. A woman blames her husband's snoring on a feline hex. A bishop refuses to sit in any chair a cat has ever touched. You meet a scribe who claims to have traced dozens of these images back to a single, anonymous carver, someone using the pseudonym M. No one knows who M is, but they've got a sharp wit and apparently a very cooperative printing press. Rumour has it M travels with a black cat. You ask what the cat's name is. The scribe leans in eyes wide. They call it Ink Paw. Naturally, some towns start banning cat-themed images altogether. Others embrace them. One mayor even commissions a mural of a black cat holding a scroll that reads, "The truth has 9 lives." As the days pass, you start to notice cats taking on a strange duality. In satire, they're wise and mischievous symbols of knowing smirks and unseen consequences. But to those already prone to superstition, the humour only reinforces their fears. You speak to a friar who tries to make sense of it all. Perhaps, he says, sipping from a chipped mug the cat represents what we don't want to face, that someone or something always knows more than we think. He pauses. Or perhaps we've just run out of goats to blame. You thank him and return to the square, where yet another pamphlet is being passed around, this one claiming a cat named Shadow Lord overheard a noble's will being altered and then tripped the lawyer down the stairs. You're not sure what's real anymore. But one thing is clear, the black cat has gone from village pariah to cultural icon meme of the Middle Ages, feared and adored in equal measure. And not everyone is amused, because tonight in the woods there's talk of a gathering. Not of people, of cats. You're in the woods now, and it's far too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. No, this is the tense kind. The kind that usually comes right before someone steps on a twig and gets accused of being a werewolf. The trees arch overhead like gossiping monks, and your lantern flickers despite a complete lack of wind. Something's watching. It started with whispers at the tavern. Someone heard from someone who overheard a man who definitely wasn't drinking that on moonless nights. The black cats gather. Not near homes, not in alleyways, but deep in the forest, where even the deer walk softly. Naturally, you decided to investigate. Of course you did. You duck under a low-hanging branch and pause. Ahead, the clearing opens like a natural stage. There's something odd. Not unnatural, just organised. The leaves have been swept into a perfect circle. A ring of mossy stones sits evenly spaced, as if arranged by tiny paws, with a strong sense of symmetry. And there in the centre are cats, dozens of them, all black, all sitting in silence. You crouch behind a log and squint. Some are long-haired, others sleek and small. One wears what appears to be a piece of ribbon, possibly stolen from a noblewoman or a very fashionable goose. None of them move, none of them blink. Then slowly the largest cat steps forward. It walks to the middle of the circle, turns to face the others, and lets out a single commanding "Murrow." The rest meow back in strange rhythmic patterns, like call and response, but with fewer vowels and more implications. You've stumbled into a feline assembly. You remind yourself that this could be perfectly natural. Cats are social, sometimes, when the mood strikes them, and yet there's something undeniably ceremonial about this moment. In fact, historical records do mention strange cat gatherings. A few 15th century shepherds in the Basque region reported seeing many shadow beasts in the glade, all with eyes like coins sitting in council. Others claim to hear midnight yowls in harmony, not rage. Historians still argue whether these accounts were metaphors, delusions, or very organised strays. You inch closer, trying not to snap a twig or sneeze dramatically. The cats shift, all turning their heads at once toward a newcomer, a hooded figure, stepping quietly into the clearing, their cloak trailing behind like they'd just emerged from a bedtime story or a very niche conspiracy. They kneel. The lead cat approaches. There's a moment heavy, still weirdly respectful. The figure extends a hand. The cat sniffs it, then shockingly gives a tiny approving chirp before returning to the circle. Initiation. You blink. Now the human speaks. Not loudly, just a whisper that somehow carries to every edge of the grove. Brothers and sisters, of shadow and silence, they murmur our time approaches. You glance to your left. A cat is sitting beside you. You did not hear it arrive. It offers a slow blink. You attempt one in return. It seems satisfied. Back in the circle, the speaker continues. They talk of injustice, of burned friends, of mocked names and broomsticks and bells, of woodcuts and laughter and the stink of fear masked as control. This world, they say, has called us cursed. But curses learn, curses adapt. You hear the tiniest sound, a purr that starts with one cat, then spreads low and steady like distant thunder or a very smug kettle. Then comes the chanting, not from the person, from the cats. It's not human language, obviously. It's a chorus of strange trills and short, sharp meows. It shouldn't be haunting, but somehow it is. Not because it's evil, but because it's intentional. These cats have something to say, and they've said it before. You've read fringe texts that mention the cult of the whiskered eye, supposedly disbanded in the 1300s. According to legend, it was a group of magic-practicing villagers who believed cats were messengers from the spirit realm, capable of channeling wisdom through behaviour. Sit to the left, good fortune. Flick tail twice, change your travel plans. Lick paw and turn, counterclockwise, don't marry that guy. You get the idea. The church suppressed these groups naturally. Some were executed, others vanished. But cats aren't so easy to silence. The speaker steps back. The lead cat paces to the circle's edge, brushes against the stones, and just like that, the gathering begins to dissolve. Cats slip back into the trees, soundless trailing shadows like cloaks. You stay frozen for several minutes, then cautiously rise. The clearing is empty, not a paw print in sight. You stumble back to the village, mind buzzing with questions, heart fluttering like it's been licked by moonlight. Were you just dreaming? Possibly. But as you step into the tavern to recount what you definitely didn't hallucinate, a familiar black cat hops onto the bar and stares straight at you. The bartender sighs. That one always shows up before something weird happens. And weird indeed is coming, because now the cats aren't just symbols or secrets. They're stepping into history's spotlight in battle, in plague, and in prophecy. Morning breaks with the sort of dramatic overcast that makes you wonder if the sky is in a particularly moody phase. You awaken to the rhythmic clanging of something metal, and someone yelling about undercooked stew being a sign of poor moral character. Ah, medieval life. You step outside and immediately trip over a black cat. It doesn't move, just looks at you like you've deeply inconvenienced it and possibly dishonoured its ancestors. You mutter an apology, and it saunters off tail high, clearly the winner in this interaction. You weren't planning to follow an army today, but fate, questionable curiosity, and a cart full of marching cheese rations pull you along. The region is preparing for a skirmish standard medieval fare. Borders insults, livestock disputes, someone called someone else's aunt, a mud witch, and now everyone must suffer. But as you reach the encampment, you realise something's off. Among the tents, armour and soup cauldrons, there are cats, not just the scraggly kind looking for fish heads, though they're present and opinionated, but sleek, silent black cats. And they're everywhere. One rides in a basket tied to a knight's saddle. Another sleeps under the general's war map. A third paces the perimeter like it's conducting an inspection. No one seems surprised. Good luck, a soldier tells you. Keeps the rats and demons out. And sometimes the messengers someone else adds, half joking. But there's truth behind the humour. During times of war, soldiers often turn to superstition for comfort, or at least scapegoats. Black cats were blamed for losses, but also credited for unlikely victories. One chronicle even records a battle being miraculously won after the captain's cat leapt from his tent and stared down an enemy scout. Historians still argue whether this was valour or vitamin deficiency. You watch as a group of archers adjust their formations because a black cat sat in their original position and refused to move. Their sergeant sighs, better to change the line than tempt fate. Meanwhile, over by the plague tents, grim quiet things, you see a curious sight. A black cat, lying between two patients, calm as a statue, eyes half closed. A healer nods toward it. That one always knows. If it stays with you through the night, you'll recover. You stare. If it leaves, the healer adds, well, you probably didn't tip your apothecary. It sounds grim, but in truth, animals have long been tied to the rhythms of health and illness. Cats, in particular, with their sensitivity to temperature and subtle shifts in human behavior, were often seen as intuitive. In times of plague, some believed they absorbed sickness, while others feared they carried it. Historians still argue whether their presence was a comfort or a curse, or like most things in medieval life, both depending on the day and the wind direction. You follow one such cat, coal black with a white mark shaped like a dagger on its nose, as it weaves between tents, ignoring Cool's soup and one man's heartfelt lullaby. It stops only at a fallen banner, sniffing it briefly, before curling up beside it. Later that day, a soldier stumbles into camp with news that banner had been dropped during a retreat. They'd thought the standard bearer was lost. Turns out he survived, shielded in part by the very same corner of the battlefield. Word spreads, the cat is now considered blessed. It receives a strip of roasted meat, a velvet ribbon, and a detailed name surpounce of the Western March of the Wars. That night the men drink quietly, not just for camaraderie or comfort, but in ritual. One man raises a mug and toasts the eyes in the night that see more than we do. Several cats blink slowly in response. As the fire burns low, you hear tales passed between helmets and tankards, of battles decided by a sudden cat's yowl, of commanders who consulted their cats before accepting terms, of one noble who refused to sign a peace treaty because his black cat knocked the ink over at the last minute. Divine sign, he said, or clumsy familiar, others muttered. One man, eyes glassy with fatigue and fermented goat milk, insists he once saw a black cat walk untouched through the middle of a battlefield. Arrows flew, swords swung, and not a scratch, he says. It just walked, like war wasn't its concern. You don't know what to make of that. But as the night deepens and soldiers huddle under makeshift roofs, sharing warmth with cats curled against their sides, you see something unexpected: peace. For all their mystery and the myths tied to them, the black cats bring comfort, a presence, a pulse of life in the middle of uncertainty, until one of them knocks over the stew pot and chaos reigns briefly. Still, in the quiet that follows, you realize something. The cats aren't just watchers anymore. They've stepped into the fabric of events, quietly, unmistakably. Paw prints pressed into the pages of history. And back in the cities and towns, this shift is beginning to show, because some people aren't scared anymore. Some are starting to adore them. You return to the village, expecting the usual gossip soup, and someone yelling about chickens trespassing in the graveyard again. But instead you find something unexpected. A festival. Banners flap in the breeze, musicians toot aggressively on bagpipes, and children scamper through the square with painted faces and suspicious amounts of sugar. But more curious than any of that is the decor woven into garlands, painted on shields, embroidered onto cloaks, black cats everywhere. A boy runs past you wearing a paper mask shaped like a cat's face. A baker sells pastries shaped like curled-up kittens. And someone, possibly a lunatic, possibly a visionary, is walking around with a live black cat in a baby sling. You're stunned. What happened? You ask the woman stringing black yarn between lantern poles. Oh, she says cheerfully, it's Black Cat's blessing day. You blink. I beg your pardon. Started last year, she explains. Old Widow Trudy's black cat sat on her tax scroll, and the collector dropped dead 3 towns over. We figured that was worth celebrating. Fair point. She goes on to explain how black cats are now seen by many in the village not as spies but as protectors, even good luck charms. It's a total 180 from a few years ago, when just spotting a black cat at dusk was enough to earn you a full week of suspicious glares and 2 unsolicited exorcisms. It seems that between the rumours of battlefield blessings, healer cats, and suspiciously accurate judgment, stares the villagers have decided black cats might be on their side. You stroll past stalls where tailors sell familiar cloaks, and apothecaries hawk catnip amulets for clarity and calm. Someone even offers personalised paw readings, though the cat being used for this service is asleep, and the reader is clearly just making it up as she goes. Still, the vibe is undeniable. The fear has faded, replaced by fascination, reverence, affection even. Historians recognise this shift in some communities as a pattern of cultural reframing. Once vilified symbols can be reabsorbed, reimagined, or even turned into fashion. Just as owls went from omens to mascots and beats from curses to soup, black cats, depending on local context, found their way into the softer folds of superstition. Historians still argue whether this was driven by pragmatism parody or a deep human urge to pet whatever looks unimpressed by us. But not everyone is thrilled. In the corner of the square, a travelling preacher stands on a crate, waving a scroll and warning of feline infiltration. He gestures wildly at a nearby black cat who yawns so hard it tips over backward. People throw bread rolls at him, not maliciously, just enough to encourage a change of topic. You visit the home of a merchant named Luke. He invites you in with the excitement of a man who definitely has a photo album. "Meet Mistress Fig," he says, gesturing to a black cat reclining atop a velvet pillow. Fig blinks, once rolls onto her back and shows you precisely zero interest. "She's my luck," Luke says. "Ever since I adopted her, no mice fewer bad dreams. And get this, my cousin finally moved out." You raise your brows. "Coincidence?" he asks, then shakes his head. "No such thing with a fig in the house." He gives her a roasted sardine and whispers something about account ledgers and divine guidance. You leave with a fresh sense of awe and the lingering smell of fish. Outside, a group of children gather around a bard performing a new song, soft and gentle, telling the tale of a cat who wandered through kingdoms righting wrongs, stealing socks and always returning just before dawn. They call her Lady Midnight, and she's become something of a mythical figure among the youth. You sit on a low wall watching as day fades and lanterns flicker on. The festival glows with laughter and the occasional cat-induced panic when one leaps unexpectedly into someone's lap. You ask a passing elder how things changed. She smiles, eyes crinkling. "They never really did. We just finally admitted it. Black cats are part of us." Clever, quiet, always watching, remind you of anyone. She pats your knee and hobbles off, leaving you to ponder whether you're being compared to a medieval feline or a moderately dusty wizard. Either way, as night settles in and the festival slows, you feel it. A warmth, a shift. Because now black cats aren't just tolerated, they're celebrated. People toast to them, thank them, occasionally trip over them. One curls up beside you as you drift half asleep against a tree tail, flicking lazily. And yet for all this newfound affection, a question still lingers in the air, soft as fur and just as impossible to grasp. Why did we ever fear them in the first place? Or, more pressingly, why does that one cat keep staring at the old church tower every night at exactly midnight? It's just past midnight now, and you find yourself standing at the base of the old church tower, clutching a lantern that seems determined to flicker at the most dramatic moments. The festival's glow has faded into quiet embers. The streets are mostly empty, except for one black cat seated neatly on a cobblestone, staring up at the bell tower, like it's expecting an announcement from the heavens. This is the 5th night you've seen it here. Same time, same place, same unblinking gaze. You've asked around, of course. Most people wave it off with a laugh and a mutter about cat's hour. One man claimed the tower has been haunted ever since the bell ringer mistook a thunderstorm for Judgment Day and rang 47 times in a row. Another swore he heard whispering from the top of the tower, though that turned out to be wind, or possibly a very articulate pigeon. Tonight, though, something feels different. You climb the tower. The stairs groan beneath your boots, each step steeped in echoes. When you reach the top, there's no sign of anyone. Just old beams, a bell that looks like it's seen some things, and a chilly breeze that rustles your cloak like a nervous sigh. Then you see it, etched into the wooden support beam, almost hidden beneath layers of dust and time, a carving of a cat's face, stylized, symmetrical, ancient. Below it, faint but legible. We do not forget, we do not forgive. We wait. You lean closer, and just then from behind you, soft paws on stone. You turn, the cat is there, not frightened, not curious, just watching. It walks past you, circles the bell once, and curls up beside the carving. And then, as if on cue, the bell tolls, not loudly, not for the town, just one soft note, a chime like a whisper. You descend with more questions than answers, mind spinning with all you've seen. The trials, the fear, the worship, the satire, the strange rituals, the battlefield miracles, the bedtime tales that might have been warnings in disguise, and everywhere always black cats. Historians still argue whether their medieval reputation was born from fear of the unknown, projection of guilt, or a very unfortunate papal decree. But none of that seems to capture it, not really, because the truth is softer, stranger, more alive. Black cats weren't symbols of doom or guardians of secrets. They were reflections. They saw us clearly through war and superstition, song and firelight, through whispered prayers and loud mistakes. They watched, remembered and remained there, even when the records didn't. And so the belief never really died. It curled instead into legend. It stretched through lullabies, loomed in the background of dreams, and blinked slowly through windows on rainy days. You walk home under starlight, the soft sound of paws following just far enough behind to make you doubt them. And you think maybe it's not about whether black cats were spies or witches or silent saints. Maybe it's that they were always there, and we at last started paying attention. The fires long since settled into glowing embers, now soft and crackling, like distant thunder far beneath the earth. Outside, the wind has quieted to nothing more than a hush, through stone alleys and moss-covered rooftops. The last of the lanterns flicker gently behind shuttered windows, and even the tavern song has melted into the rhythm of sleep, of "You're safe, warm," draped in the quiet that only arrives when stories have been told, and mysteries are content to rest for now. The cat. Yes, that one has curled up at your feet, tail flicking once before going still. There's no more watching tonight. No more judgment. Just the soft, steady breath of something that's been here long before you arrived, and will be here long after you wake. Let the thoughts fade now one by one. Let the flickers of curiosity become the shadows of dreams. Because in this moment wrapped in the quiet weight of history, you don't need answers. Just rest. And if in the deepest part of the night you hear a gentle meow from somewhere far off, it's probably nothing. Probably.